Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. So excited to be with y'all today. Thank you for attending the webinar. Excited to be talking about content strategies and organic lead gen. I know we obviously just hit 1 o'clock, so I will give people a minute to kind of trickle in. But in the meantime, I will share a little bit about Nexus. I'm not sure exactly, who's going to be on the call today. I think we have a couple of existing clients, but a lot of new faces as well. So I'll give kind of a quick overview of the business. So Nexus Marketing is a digital marketing agency. We are based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and our specialization is in inbound lead gen and SEO for businesses that sell into mission-driven industries. So we typically work with software and service providers who are then selling to nonprofits, healthcare organizations, educational organizations, K-12, higher ed, and associations. So that is a little bit about what we do. We are thinking about content strategies, lead gen, SEO, all day, every day for our clients. So I'm super excited to be chatting about that with y'all today. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started. If you've got any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the questions feature at the bottom right of your screen. I think it's the bottom right. I'll take some questions at the end. And then we also have a team member from Nexus in the chat. You can find them under Nexus Marketing. So if you've got any, if you're running into technical issues or anything, feel free to leave a note in the chat, let them know. They can help troubleshoot. And of course, feel free, even if you're not running into issues, to use the chat. Love to hear from y'all if you've got questions, thoughts, comments, all of the above. All right. Last thing before we dive in, I would love to get a sense from the group on how focused your role is on SEO, what kind of level of expertise, maybe your experience we have in SEO in the group today. So we've got our poll, perfect, has been published. So excited to kind of see what the group is. I'll give you all a second to submit your votes. Looking like a couple people here just to learn, a couple people where it's like, SEO is 100% of your focus. Interesting. So we've got a kind of a mix. Really interesting. Okay, great. All right. So I will go ahead and get things started. So, as probably a lot of y'all are aware, if your role is pretty focused on SEO, there are a couple of different kind of foundational building blocks of SEO. One, of course, is your technical foundation, how your website is crawled and indexed, all of those kind of technical elements of how it's understood by Google. That really is what we would consider like your ticket to participate in the game. Your content cannot rank if it is not crawled by Google and if your website isn't crawled by Google. So that is, that's kind of that foundational piece there. Then, of course, is content. You have to create relevant content to rank for topics. If you don't have any content on your website about a specific topic, you are not going to rank for that topic. It's plain and simple. So content is that second piece. And then backlinks, of course, which is, creating authority by having other sites linked to you. We're not really going to talk about that in a huge amount of depth today, but if that's something that, we would want to cover and y'all would want to see in a future webinar, feel free to let me know. Would be happy to cover that in a future event. So let's go ahead and get started with content strategies. First piece, of course, is like figuring out what kind of content you want to create, right? Brainstorming those ideas, ideating on what your content strategy should look like. So where we always recommend starting and where we always start with our clients is doing a content audit. So taking a look at what content you already have on your website and evaluating, its performance, its relevance, and kind of just getting a deeper understanding of what's there. This probably resonates with some of you, but for businesses that have been around for a long time, websites that have been around for a long time, potentially with teams that have had members come on and off of them over the years, there's oftentimes a lot of backlog of content from years and years and years ago. So just getting a good sense of what is on your website. when you're doing this content audit, we would really recommend thinking through a couple big questions here. So is there content already on your site that could be expanded or improved? Thinking through kind of understanding what's already there. If it's not broke, don't, kind of not really, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But, is there an opportunity to take something that, could be better and make it better instead of starting from scratch? Another thing to look at is what types of content or topics perform best. So if you're seeing that you've got, pages that are on a specific area that you work in, or maybe a specific vertical that you work in, that is really getting a lot of traction, maybe that's an indicator to you that that topic is really relevant to that audience, to your audience, or that particular audience is engaging more heavily in your content or types of content, right? Maybe your high level educational content is performing really well. Maybe your product pages are performing really well. Getting a sense of what is working and what isn't is a great indicator of, what your audience wants and what you should maybe focus on. And then thinking through as well, do you have content that effectively addresses all stages of the sales funnel? So thinking through, not just do you have good product pages that are focused on converting into demos, but do you have, maybe comparison pages for more of that middle of the funnel area where people are maybe comparing multiple products or services? Do you have that really top of funnel educational content? That's going to be really valuable for more of those informational searches, making sure that you've got those different levels represented. So content audit, it's a great place to start. And, again, just wanting to make sure you have a good understanding of what content is already there before you start thinking about what gaps you need to fill. And, there's not really a way to know what gaps you need to fill until you get a good sense of what content you already have. Next piece here is a competitor analysis. And competitor analysis is really interesting because there are really two ways to think about it. There's, of course, like the traditional competitor where they are, they have a competing product or service where, if someone was buying your product, you could be going up against, another company in a buying process. So for example, from the healthcare space, right, like CureMD, it's a great example of a really large EHR software. It's an electronic healthcare record. It's a pretty standard software category for the healthcare space. There are a bunch of other companies that have, very similar products in that same category. Of course, they're not the exact same, but they certainly serve the same function. Examples here, Cario, Athena Health, there are loads to think of. So those are organizations that are, like direct product competitors. When you're thinking about SEO, though, there's this other category that we would consider SEO competitors, where basically they may not actually be competitive as a business, but they are competing for the same keywords as you. So, an example from the nonprofit space, you've got Jitasa. There are a bunch of others, examples of, nonprofit accounting firms where they are like an outsourced service, right? They're going to, they're selling a service, not necessarily a product. Then you've got software providers like Applos, which is a big one in the nonprofit space that is an accounting software. So those two businesses, they're not actually selling the same thing. They're not really technically competitors from a product standpoint. But realistically, both businesses probably would want to rank for keywords like nonprofit accounting. Totally different business model, but they are competing for the same keywords. And so when you're thinking about that for your own business, it's really useful to think through not just, who are those businesses that we go up against during a buying process or a sales process, who are the kind of direct competitors, but also who are your SEO competitors? What kinds of other businesses are going to be trying to rank for the topics you want to be known for? Because again, there are only so many places on the first page of Google. You can't all rank number one. And if someone, is ranking above you and taking that traffic that is not going to you, regardless, right, of whether or not, y'all are direct competitors. They are taking traffic directly away from you if they're outranking you there. So, I would be curious to know kind of from the group, and we can get this poll published here as well. Let me go ahead and put that out. Perfect. So I would be curious to know from this group, what tools you guys are currently using for keyword research. And if you pick that kind of other tool section, would love to know, maybe drop in the chat what other tools you're using, or maybe maybe you're not doing any keyword research now. And that's not necessarily part of your strategy. So I'll give everyone a minute here to kind of submit their answers, and then we can take a look. Okay, I'm seeing a couple people come through with a different tool. I'd be curious if you selected a different tool. Do you mind dropping in the chat what it is? I'm always curious. Our team prefers SEMrush, but I'd be curious to know kind of what other tools people are using. Oh, you're using an SEO agency. Great. So it sounds like, you guys aren't necessarily doing your own keyword research there. You're relying on an external vendor to do some of that work for y'all. That's awesome. Great. Okay. Well, one thing I did want to do, I'd be curious, if anyone wants to volunteer, their website domain, I actually am going to pull up SEMrush. If not, I'm happy to use one of our clients as an example. But if anyone wants to volunteer their domain as tribute here for me to take a look at on SEMrush, I want to walk through just like a quick walkthrough of how to do some of these things that I've talked about. I think it would be valuable. So I'll give everyone a chance. If no one wants to volunteer, that's totally okay. If not, I'm happy to use. Okay, Anna, thank you. Okay, great. Okay, watermark. Let me quickly copy this. Okay, and I will go ahead and share my screen and we can take a look. So I pulled up SEMrush here, and I'm going to go ahead and take out double the donation, and I'm going to put in watermark. Awesome. So what you see here is you've got kind of a big domain overview with a bunch of different kind of data pieces here. So what I would recommend, especially when you're starting out with like that content audit and you're trying to figure out which pages are going to be the most valuable, what I would recommend doing is going over here to organic research, and then, give it a second to load. It's got a bunch of stuff here, but then go over to pages. And what you can see is what it'll do is it will separate all of your pages out. So it looks like y'all have 1,300 pages, pretty big website. I'm impressed. And it'll show you kind of how much traffic you're seeing, how many keywords your different content is ranking for. So like for Watermark, it looks like y'all have a bunch of different blog articles that see some pretty good organic traffic, right? You've got good keywords here. So this is a great way to go ahead and look and see, if we were to keep scrolling down, we could definitely filter those out if that, wasn't something that mattered as much. But finding some of these pages that maybe are seeing less traffic, that could be a great opportunity to say, okay, maybe these are pieces that we could improve. Or looking at some of these top performing pages and saying, okay, well, if these are what perform really well, what do these have in common? How can I emulate these, or these topics that might be, interesting? Oh no, I think I might have dropped my video there for a second. Okay, we'll see. Anyways, so that's kind of one way to do this. Another great tool with SEMrush specifically, and I'm confident other tools have, other products have this as well, is if you go to here to Keyword Gap, you can actually put in other competitors, and it will look and it will compare what keywords that your competitors rank for that you don't. This is a great tool, again, for that like direct competitor analysis, where you're looking at people who are, selling similar products or services to yours. Great opportunity to see what they're doing, see what works for them, and what you might want to emulate. And then if you're thinking through how to identify some SEO competitors, what I would do is I would go, let's see if it'll load for me here. And, what I would do is I would just look up a bunch of the keywords that you would want to be known for and, get a sense of what, who's ranking for those. Like if we were to look up, higher education software, right? Like let's take that as an example. We could go and we could see we've got Oracle ranking, we've got Capterra, we've got Ellucian, Blackbaud, we've got Watermark ranking number 7. That's awesome. Ideally, right, that would probably be a little bit higher, but I think, again, great performance there. So a good opportunity to say like, well, maybe these aren't exact competitors, but they are competing for similar terms. Maybe these are, people I need to be worried about from an SEO competitor, place. So anyways, a bunch of thoughts there. That's how, we would kind of recommend looking at it. Again, a bunch of these other tools have similar, keyword analysis, all of those things, but it's a great opportunity to think through like, what are other people doing that is going really well? And how can you guys emulate that for your own business? So anyways, back to the presentation. The other piece here is thinking through doing your own customer research. So one, of course, like doing keyword research and understanding what kind of the general population is looking for. Maybe there are way more people searching for certain topics than others. That gives you kind of an overall sense of what topics people are interested in. It's a great place to start. But also then looking at really like your own direct customer base, thinking through, social media engagement, online reviews, customer surveys, things like that. Get a sense of what people are talking about, what their concerns or complaints are, what issues they're dealing with. That's a great place to kind of mine ideas that would be, relevant for you to maybe create some content around. So moving right along, what does it look like to actually create an SEO calendar? I would say that the biggest challenge for most organizations is understanding how to prioritize content, right? There are a million different things that you could be writing about and posting about. And you just don't have the time to do all of them. So here's how we would recommend prioritizing things from, again, that pure SEO standpoint. One is focusing on bottom of the funnel content first. Bottom of the funnel content, we would consider things that are ranking for highly sales focused terms. So again, like, higher education software providers, someone who is looking up that term is probably much higher intent and much farther along the buying process than someone who is looking up like, I don't know, higher ed enrollment statistics, right? Those aren't the same, to pull an example. So again, that bottom of the funnel content from that SEO perspective, it is the most likely to convert into actual qualified leads. And so that's what you should always prioritize first, starting kind of bottom of the funnel, moving your way up. Another thing that we'd recommend is finding opportunities to optimize existing content over net new content. In general, it is easier and faster to improve the keyword performance of an existing piece of content that has history with Google. It's been indexed before. It probably has some backlinks pointing to it already, all of those things, versus ranking a net new piece of content. Again, not to say that it is not possible to rank new content. That's certainly not the case. We do it all the time. But again, it's probably going to be faster and easier to see results with an existing piece of content. And frankly, it's going to be less work for your team, taking a piece that already exists, expanding it, improving it, optimizing it versus starting from scratch. So it's kind of a win-win there in general. Thinking through search volume and difficulty of the main keyword is a great way to evaluate and prioritize content that maybe is very similar in terms of some of these other factors. It's going to be a similar amount of work to put in. Maybe its current performance is somewhat similar if it's existing content. Maybe it's at a same kind of point in the sales funnel and you're trying to figure out like, what do I do first? One probably doesn't necessarily matter too much, but if you think about, you've got one page that's going to cover a keyword a topic that the keywords have like 1,000 people searching for it every month versus 50 people searching, why wouldn't you create, prioritize the content that's going to have that, broader potential reach? Something to think about. Lastly, here, our team would always recommend focusing on on-site content first before off-site content. So the distinction between on-site and off-site content. On-site content is anything that is on your actual website. It's, clear as day there. Your blogs, your product pages, your homepage, like anything that is on your domain, on-site content. And that should always come first, making sure that you have good, high quality content on your site. Part of the reason, though, is that once you have some of those offsite content opportunities, so like you're pitching content to a publication, maybe you're, cross blogging with a partner of yours, you're being referenced in some sort of way on another website. Having specific pages that you want to perform well that you can link to in those offsite pieces is going to be way more valuable than just having them linked to your homepage. Now, that's always good. It is going to be beneficial for you to have pieces of content on other sites pointing to your homepage. Like, that's never going to be a bad thing. It's certainly better than not having those links at all. But those links are going to really be much more effective if they're pointing towards specific pages that you want to rank well for your site. And again, if you don't have those pages, there's not necessarily something to link to in that offsite content. So again, that's why we would recommend on-site pieces before prioritizing offsite. Offsite's really great. But again, it's most effective when it's pointing to really high quality, intentional pieces on your own site. All right. Next one here is kind of just a note. Again, my guess is probably a lot of y'all know this already, but we really want to organize our content into keyword clusters and make sure that we have like one page per keyword cluster, one keyword cluster per page. We don't want pieces of content competing for keywords, and we don't want Google to be confused on which pages it should rank for specific keywords, particularly if they're high value. And, on the flip side, if you've got one page and you're trying to get it ranked for two drastically different keyword clusters, by trying to get it to rank for both, you're going to make it harder to rank for either. So it makes the most sense to have one keyword cluster. So like you've got your main keyword and then a couple of different very similar variations that would make sense, right? So for example, like fundraising consultant might be the main one. Variations of that might be like fundraising consulting, fundraising consultants, top fundraising consultants, like very similar things that, right, those are all in the same cluster, versus then wanting to fold in another thing on like nonprofit galas or, something that might be related, but it kind of, but not really, and is a different keyword cluster. So again, really wanting to make sure that you've got it organized and you're making sure that your kind of keywords are mapped onto the content in that way, is really valuable. In terms of actually like creating your content calendar, I'm not going to tell you how exactly to do this. I mean, people do it in spreadsheets, people do it in Kanban boards, people do it in project management software, like whatever that looks like for you and your team, have at it. That's not my concern at all, certainly. But there are a couple of things that we would really recommend like including in your content calendar that's going to make it, easy, straightforward for the team to keep things kind of organized and straight. So of course, like your topic and your main keyword, whether or not that page is net new or an update to an existing piece of content. What type of page is it? Is it a blog article? Is it a case study? Is it a service page? What are some of those supporting keyword variations that you would also want this page to rank for? Some data on the keyword itself, what the URL is, especially if it's an existing page, what that URL is for the page you're going to be updating. And then, keeping track of some of the operational bits. Was the topic approved? If there's an outline, keeping it in one place. When is it scheduled for? What is the published URL? All of that stuff is really great to keep track of as you're building out this content calendar. Obviously, there are going to be, maybe some pieces of content in here that are not necessarily going to be SEO focused, but for SEO, these are the types of things that we would recommend keeping in one place to kind of help help keep things organized. Before we wrap up here, we've got a few minutes. I do want to make just a note on like content quality over quantity. I think it is very tempting, especially in this emerging age of AI, to use some of these AI tools to churn out a really large volume of content. And it's easier than ever to put out a really large volume of content. What our team would really recommend, though, is that it is more important to put out high quality, high intent, high impact content versus a large volume of crap, basically. Minimally, I think there are great opportunities to use some of these tools to brainstorm ideas, outline, maybe even put together like some sort of first initial draft. Maybe if you've trained it in a way that you feel confident in the output that it puts out. I certainly haven't found a tool where I feel 100% confident in the output, but that's me being very picky. But it is more important to have really high quality content than to have a really high volume of content. It's interesting when we look at, if we were to pull up pages on SEMrush, right? Like we took a look at watermarks. For a lot of businesses, you will see that, if they've got 1,000 pages on your site, maybe 100 of them, like maybe 10% of them are driving 99% of traffic. And then the rest of them aren't driving traffic and are just kind of sitting there clogging up the website. There are plenty of other purposes other than SEO for content on your site. But I don't believe, and our agency does not believe in content for content's sake and putting things out there just to put things out there. So, when you're building out your content calendar, your time is precious. And I would really recommend figuring out how to prioritize what is really going to drive impact on your website, saving your time, for other kind of things that are important versus just churning out, content for content's sake. So I'll hop off my soapbox there. That's my kind of spiel. I think, again, it's pertinent with all these AI tools coming out, but, something to think about. Lastly here, just when we're talking about good content, these are really the 3 principles that I would really recommend you think about as you're building out your actual, your content. Great, you build out your content calendar, you're developing the content. What does that actually look like? Thinking through, are you representing your brand appropriately, accurately? Are you highlighting your brand in the best way possible? Thinking through that. Thinking through, is this really meeting my audience's needs, kind of coming at content from the perspective of what are my customers looking for? What answers are, what questions are they asking? What answers are they looking to solve? If I were searching for this, what type of content would I find helpful? Thinking through, again, that audience piece. And then, of course, there's always the algorithm, making sure that you're thinking through, am I incorporating the appropriate keywords? Am I, structuring this correctly? Am I layering in all those technical elements? So anyways, just a couple things there. I know we're starting to come up on time. So I will stop here. We are at 1:29. If you have to hop off, it was so nice to see you. Thank you for attending. If you've got questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. Happy to take some questions. I don't have a hard stop. So if there are any, happy to hang on for a few minutes and answer. And if not, we'll be thrilled to see you next time. And thank you for attending. Let's see, I'll give it maybe one more minute to see if any questions arise. Oh, great. A question about the recording. The recording should be sent out automatically after the event. And, of course, if that doesn't happen or if it ends up in your spam or you can't find it, let me know. Our team is more than happy to send over a copy of the recording. So yes, it should be sent automatically, but happy to share there. Ooh, interesting question about our opinions on the software kind of providers. Again, we typically use SEMrush. That's what we have found to be most effective for the way that we use as an agency. We use the tools. We've used Moz in the past. I quite like Moz for keyword research. I find that, I find that it's really comparable to SEMrush. For keyword research, I don't necessarily feel like it fits some of those other like competitor analysis areas as well, or as accurately as SEMrush. So, I think kind of depending on what you're using it for, I think it's really comparable. I think part of it also is a little bit of just kind of personal preference. I don't have a lot of experience with RFs. We haven't found that that's like the most beneficial for our team, but I know lots of people use it and like it. So anyways, just a couple thoughts there. All right. Any last questions before I go? Doesn't look like it. All right. Well, thank y'all so much. I was thrilled to have you guys. Thanks for attending. Again, the recording will be sent out. And if you've got any questions or, want to connect with us about ways we could maybe support your content strategy, feel free to reach out to me. We've dropped my LinkedIn in the chat, and also, my email is Jenny, that's JENNY, .russ, RUSS @nexusmarketing.com. Thank you all so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.